Welcome to Cyber Synapse, the podcast that's creating connections through candid conversations about cyber issues. Sponsored by Agency, with your host, Kath Nibbs. Hi, welcome to this week's episode. This week I'm joined by Laura Higgins from the Revenge Porn Helpline. This week we are discussing revenge porn. And this is a topic which Laura and I go into, and Laura really describes very, very well. It was a podcast that was aptly timed as during the last week, BBC in the northern region, BBC Look North, actually did a piece on the statistics around the number of cases that end up with prosecutions and convictions. So what we kind of discuss is what revenge porn actually is. And for those of you who are regular listeners, you will know that this was an issue that was challenged with Susan McLean when she said that actually we need to change the language around this. So that's the very first thing that we go into, is why the language definition of this particular offence is so difficult. It's a really interesting conversation. We look at all of the different types of offences that take place, but also this happens to be in the last week, just as the bill for the upskirting offence has been blocked. And for those who don't know what upskirting is, it's where an image is taken from, usually from a mobile phone, as the name defines, up the skirt of an unsuspecting victim. Obviously, this tends to be male on female offences when you look at actually how this happens. However, when we talk about revenge porn today, we actually discuss about how this affects men too. And that's been my experience in working in the therapy practice, is it's males that I've dealt with that seem to have a really big impact on this as well. So what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of light background reading if you're interested. Gavin de Becker wrote a book called The Gift of Fear. And in this book, he talks about the two fears that we have as our main fear based on our gender, if you like. And he talks about the fear that women have that's always on their mind is the fact that they might be attacked and raped. And for men, it's to be humiliated. And when you look at porn revenge, what you're looking at is pretty much the two fears that people have kind of feel like this. When I've sat with a lot of my victims, this is exactly what they've actually described is, for men, it's been about the humiliation. It might be about the fact that people then may say something and ridicule them for the size of their genitalia, for how it looks, etc., etc. And for women, it pretty much feels like that they have been raped. I think that's how it was described in the Look North piece that happened this last week. And what's been really interesting is when I was doing the interviews for BBC, the people who interviewed me clearly wanted to get a story out of this issue, but didn't quite understand what porn revenge was as an issue itself. So I'm really pleased to have done this episode with Laura. She obviously knows her stuff. She absolutely ought to, because it's her job. But if there was anybody to explain it, Laura does it absolutely lovely and really quite openly in this interview. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think there's any swearing in this episode, which, you know, you would think how people really experience this, that there might be a lot of swear words, but actually for once I maintained my dignity and didn't talk too much about what victims actually say in the therapy room, which can be quite hard hitting. Again, if you're interested in more of these episodes, there's another topical issue coming up over the next few weeks, one that I have attempted to address in certain ways in previous podcasts, but actually I'm going to be getting a lot more academics, because there's quite a few of us that really want to push forward regarding this particular issue. So I'm going to keep that as a carrot and stick temptation for you. But head on over to www.patreon.com, that's patreon.com/cybersynapse, and sign up to become one of my Patreons. You know, make a monthly donation. It can be £1, $1, whatever denomination it is. And this is to support me as an independent podcaster. I'm looking to use trainees in media studies to come along and help with the audio, because I'm aware this is not a high quality podcast in terms of audio. And if I can get, you know, a bit of support behind me, then that allows me to go and help the younger generation. And that is one of the things that I'm attempting to do as well. Provide a platform for young upcoming media students to come and practice their skills. It means that you will get better audio for the upcoming podcasts. And obviously this is about a win-win situation, not to quote Stephen Covey too much, but there we are. Yeah, please enjoy the interview. Any comments that you've got, please do come back to me, message me, email me. You can find me via cybertrauma.com. That's my website, and you can send emails, you can send questions, you can even send topics that you'd like to be covered. I do have a list as long as my arm. However, there may be things that I haven't considered, so please do make this a social interaction in terms of that was what I intended for Cyber Synapse. Sorry, I've gone on again. It seems to be in my repertoire. So if you're going to be a regular listener, you're going to have to put up with me, I suppose, unless maybe you put money into Patreon to keep me quiet. Okay, see you all next week. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Cyber Synapse. This week, I'm joined by Laura Higgins. Laura Higgins is the Online Safety Operations Manager, running 2 helplines and being an absolute goddess in the world of e-safety, further down south than I am at the moment. So today we're going to be talking about one particular topic, which is the Revenge Porn Helpline. And first of all, why do you do what you do, Laura?
So I've been working in online safety for about 8 years now. I started by being somewhat addicted to social media. I was a very early adopter of Facebook, and now it's effectively my job to spend lots of time on social media. But through running my first helpline, which is part of the UK Safer Internet Centre, it's a helpline that supports the children's workforce with online safety issues. And quite early on, we started seeing the professionals themselves becoming victims of what we would now recognise as revenge porn.
Yeah. Okay, so for those who have listened, watched the previous podcast the other week where I was challenged about the phraseology of revenge porn, one of the things that I think we might do, Laura, is let's discuss what revenge porn actually is and why that terminology is being used at the moment, but also what revenge porn actually is for anybody who's listening and watching. What is it?
So effectively, it's people having their intimate or sexual photos or images, videos, content shared online on any platform or peer-to-peer without their permission. I think the media have given it a particular sort of story that they will regularly report on, which is girl meets boy, girl foolishly sends pictures of herself by mobile phone to boy, they split up, he then shares them with his friends on Facebook. I think our experience is very, very different from that. And we'll go into talking about some of those sorts of cases and some of the trends that we see. But we support everything from sextortion, an awful lot of hidden cameras, people being filmed without their knowledge, people being sexually assaulted on camera, people being drugged and then filmed on camera, stolen content, you name it, we see it. So that idea that, you know, girl sends a picture and puts herself in a silly situation really is far from the truth. You mentioned the name. Now, this is a bit of an issue at the moment. So when we first came up with the name of the helpline, revenge porn had become a really big topic. It was talked about in the media a lot. We'd been doing some campaigning and lobbying, and certainly when I first went to government to talk to them about the issue, that was a term that they were using. And it is referenced when we were talking to the Ministry of Justice, when we were talking about legislation. Again, it was something people could recognise. So we kind of said, well, we need a name for a helpline that people will know what it is, something that explains what we do, that if they Google it, what would be the first thing they would look for? We spent weeks and weeks working with our funders at the government and their press and comms teams around what's appropriate. And of course, anything that's around privacy would invite lots of non-cases. It wasn't very specifically a women's issue because we get a lot of male clients. And so the term revenge porn, we knew that was what people generally at that time were looking for. We really support the movement to review that. We don't recognise it as, which we'll talk about in a minute, exactly summing up what the issue is, because it is so much broader. Quite often there is no element of revenge. It could be a complete stranger doing it for no reason. And it's also not porn. But the reality is a lot of the content is put on porn sites. And so that's something we need to work through. I think the preferred term at the moment is image-based abuse or image-based sexual abuse. And we do use those terms of a way of kind of encapturing a bit more what the behaviour is. But obviously in terms of renaming the helpline, it's a bit tricky at the moment because non-consensual image-based abuse helpline isn't really that catchy.
And also we'd be going into the world of acronyms, and then you take away from what it is you're trying to achieve, really. And it is easy for people to understand. So the very fact that pornography conjures up an image for people of sexual activity, that kind of really does what it says on the tin. And yeah, I'm quite interested in the idea of image-based abuse. So I think this was what's been on my mind since doing the other podcast. Is I look at other kinds of images, so graphic images, and actually that would be image-based abuse, but it doesn't mean the same thing. So I think the word sexual might need to be in there. And then, whether people recognise sexual abuse, and this is one of the things that happens in my therapy room, is quite often I will talk to people about trauma, and people will assume trauma is an earthquake or what happened at the Manchester Arena. And trauma is something very singular, and it's a story, and it's the same for kind of these words around sexual abuse, is what people will assume. Well, that wasn't actually sexual abuse because it didn't. And we're tapping into stereotypes and prejudices, aren't we?
I'm going to throw one incident, and it's quite shocking, so sorry for your viewers. But we actually support quite a lot of celebrities. Now, that in itself gets us quite a lot of bad press because people say, well, they should be able to get a lawyer. But when we talk about celebrities now in the UK, we're talking about people who have been on the television. They probably, in a lot of cases, still live at home with their parents. They still have a part-time job. They just happen to have a reality TV show. If they're very lucky, they might get a few magazine covers. Or even people who are not actually on the television, but are kind of Instagram celebrities or YouTubers, that kind of thing. So in the public eye, but they're not wealthy. Then they don't have access to private solicitors to do DCMA notices for them and to get injunctions. And it's really interesting because some people really kind of say, well, they don't deserve any support. You know, they've probably brought it on themselves because they're putting themselves out there. One case in particular we're working with, she is absolutely beautiful. She was on a very well-known reality TV show probably about 5 years ago. She's done swimwear modelling since then. She's done kind of lingerie, underwear stuff, but, you know, not even kind of topless, you know, still, but, you know, there's a lot of images out there and she is beautiful. So you can see why there would be a desire to go and look for more content.
Yes.
He became a victim, and there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures of her shared by an ex-partner, very abusively. But a lot of it is sexual content that was shared between them, you know, either stuff that was taken consensually at the time. But in amongst all of these photographs is a picture of her having just given birth to her child in hospital. There is nothing sexual about that. It's a very private and intimate moment. It shows her naked. But if we're to look at image-based sexual abuse, there was nothing sexually abusive about sharing that picture. There's no sexual motivation. It's not going to turn people on looking at it. They're just going to see the vagina. And so I think, you know, even using that term, she's very, very much abused. It's very harmful. It's harassment. It's all sorts of things. But is it sexual abuse in that context? And I think we need to be really careful sometimes about what the term is.
Well, absolutely. I think one of the, and again, I'm just going to go with some of the children. Obviously, there is a slight difference here, is I tend to work with younger children, and obviously the helpline is, although it's 18 plus, we'll talk about that in a moment, actually. I'm working with young children, and even in their underwear, it is still sexual abuse when you know, so we do get into the complications of what's lawfully descriptive and what's also phenomenological descriptive, so a person's experience of what's happened. And it's about how they this is about the impact of it, isn't it? This is why quite often I talk about cyberbullying being a phenomena. It isn't actually just one thing, and it can happen just the once, because if a person's affected just the once, then they have been cyberbullied. And this is kind of where I pretty much argue, and I'm sure you know I do this, Laura, that I do argue with people that it's not a repeated event. And for one person to have one image, actually that can have a devastating effect. And yeah, I can kind of see why it's such a broad brushstroke, this, in terms of how you would label it. And I'm just drawn to the issues that we talk about. So yesterday I was at a cyber group. The word cyber, where does that, you know, we've changed from cyber to electronic to back to cyber, back to digital. But yeah, I think it's just too difficult. And the on-off phenomena. So I use different terminology. I use corporeal and virtual to mean real. Mm-hmm. And that which we view, and again, even that, you know, scientifically and academically, there is no difference for how a brain perceives it as well. Yeah. So,
and increasingly for young people.
Oh,
I mean, interesting that you say about the definition. So, in the UK, we have now got legislation that came in April 2015, yep. Which is around disclosing private images with an intent to cause distress. So we'll come back to the law later, because that's a good debate to have. And that idea around intent to cause distress. But it's very, very finite in what it does. We were part of a working group when they were looking at reviewing it and introducing the law. In fact, I was with Maria Miller, and we first drew up a draft which would have been under the Sexual Offences Act, and it actually sat within voyeurism, and we felt that that was really appropriate. It would have had a 4-year custodial sentence. It wouldn't automatically mean people signing onto the Sex Offenders Register, but in some most serious cases it would.
Yeah.
And we really felt that that summed it up, and it sat comfortably. That's not how it ended up being. It's under the general criminal justice, it carries a maximum of 2 years sentence, and we've never really seen anyone get anything like that yet. But it doesn't include underwear, it doesn't include swimwear, it doesn't include photoshopped images, which is an awful lot of abuse. It is really, really finite. So our helpline is not like that. So as you said, sometimes it's about the perception. So clearly a lot of the images we deal with are very sexual in nature, or they're very private in nature, but we will also support particularly women from different communities. So different ethnic backgrounds, people from Muslim communities particularly, where they may be dancing provocatively but fully clothed. They may be showing a little bit of cleavage, but in the community that could be, you know, enough to get death threats. So from our point of view, it's about that intention. The person is sharing it to cause them harm, to harass them, to abuse them online. And to that person, they feel that shamefulness, which we're always trying to fight, but we would tackle that in exactly the same way as we would a fully naked picture of somebody, even if the law may not back that up. We work with a lot of social media companies around helping them with policy and reporting and how they tackle these issues, and most of them now have also broadened their remit. So when we're talking about non-consensual images being posted, or the non-consensual posting of images, it will include people in lingerie, people in swimwear, if it is clear that it has been taken in a private setting and it isn't therefore professional modelling or something like that. So that's a really positive step forward.
I did just want to say, actually, so one of the things I do in my podcast is I talk about everybody else's podcasts that I listen to. So there is a philosopher and neuroscientist that I listen to called Sam Harris. I think it might have been about 2 podcasts ago. He did one on about honour. So the conversation that he had with somebody was about honour-based killings and honour-based murder. And actually, this is where we need to start looking at. Actually, this is not just white middle-class person who's taken an image in their bedroom, or young girl who has been potentially groomed. This is about varying levels of cultural, religious beliefs and action as well. So this idea of what's considered appropriate and inappropriate is very much a debate in its own right. And obviously I don't want to go down that route because that's rather philosophical, and I did that last week. So I'm just thinking about, how people would actually happen upon their own images. So I'm just thinking about how people would actually come into contact with you, and what can be done about it. Because I think these are the two important things that I really definitely want to get into this podcast is what happens when you come across an image that you think might be you or has been shared, and then what do you do about it? How do people come to you? What do you do as a helpline, and how does it work?
Thank you. So we have had so many different ways that people have become aware that the content's there. So the first thing is, as I say, the media would have you believe that all the content's posted on Facebook. Well, less than 10% of our content that we report is actually on social media.
Yeah.
The threat to share is about 25% of our cases, and that threat will always be, if you don't do what I say, or if you don't come back to me, or I'm going to shame you, you'll never get a job again, I'm going to put it all over Facebook. So the threat will always be about social media, but it is rarely on social media.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is literally that the perpetrator says, oh, you might want to go and check this platform because you're all over it, you know, and quite often that is part of the intimidation and the harassment. Sometimes there was quite a big movement some time ago, which thankfully seems not to be so prevalent now, but getting third parties involved and getting bystanders to harass the victim. So they would say to people, here's that person's email, or here's that person's Twitter or Facebook, go DM them and tell them that you've seen their content. And so not only does this person find out their images are online, but they've got complete strangers going, oh, I thought I'd better tell you, I've seen your pictures, or even I think you're beautiful, or even somebody told me where you live, I'm going to come around and see you, you know, that real intimidation stuff. It does happen that, so for example, there was a big phenomenon about something called AnonIB, which were image boards. Thankfully, they've now been shut down, which is amazing. But they were basically locality based. So every town in the UK pretty much had a board that was sharing images, guys anonymously sharing images of girls.
Yeah.
They were selling them for Bitcoin. They were trading them. They were kind of upgrading, going, oh, do you remember that girl from school? She was really fit. I've got pictures of her sister. Let's trade. You know, it was just a really strange phenomena. But when a few girls would find out they were on the board, suddenly everyone would realize they were all being talked about and shared, or being requested images of, or and so that was kind of girls supporting other girls with, did you know you're on here? Let's all try to group together to support one another.
Yeah.
When people stumble across content, it's possibly the rarest but the most difficult for them. So we had one really difficult case where a husband found what he thought was a video of his wife with somebody else. Very, very explicit video of them having anal sex. He basically threatened to divorce her on the spot because he said, well, you've never done that with me, and actually ended up coercing her in a very abusive relationship into engaging in sexual activity with him that she didn't want to. But yeah, that was really, really difficult, particularly because it turned out that it wasn't her. But it looked like her. She believed,
absolutely,
she genuinely believed it was her, and she, you know, she'd had quite a difficult relationship many years before. We've had cases where people have found, particularly around the photoshopping, it's a really strange phenomena where, you know, they will find pictures of themselves on different platforms just because, oh, well, I just Googled myself. I was at work and I did an online safety session and they said to do an image search or do a Google search, and then they found this content. What I would say is to reassure people, it's generally not a scattergun effect. You know, if your images are out there, it's not that they're going to be on, you know, McDonald's website and that they're going to be, you know, on the tube station and everyone can see it. And I think for some people, they're just like, everyone's going to know. Well, okay, perhaps in a education establishment or somewhere where it might be seen as fair game that we're all going to share it and laugh at the person and ridicule them. But actually, for most adult victims, that's not what happens. It is put on, it could be that it's on lots and lots of sites, but there probably are on lots and lots of porn sites. I don't know about you, but for me, in my professional life, I have to go on an awful lot of porn sites. But in my personal life, not so much. So the chances of me seeing images of my friends is pretty slim. You know, I might be doing it through work. So that's one of the first things we say to people is, look, I know you know that there's a lot of content there, but unless people are looking for it, they're less likely to find it. The search engines have done a really good job now of blacklisting a lot of those sites. So if I were to just search my name, plus the word nudes or naked video or something, it would not turn up results.
Yeah.
And any of the sites that that are dedicated to hosting content, they've all been blacklisted. So yeah, you might have to go on the dark web, or you might have to have a specific URL to find them.
Yeah.
But it's not literally that naming and shaming that it was a few years ago. So then you asked about, so my helpline. So somebody's been told there's some content.
Yep.
I think the first thing is to just acknowledge, and this fits beautifully with all the work you do, Kath, but is around the impact, the initial impact on the clients. Most of the time when they come to us, they have just found out. They are absolutely distraught,
Yep.
very traumatized. It is that really first stage trauma. They haven't even had chance to process it or what it might mean, or, you know, we are a long way from the angry phase or the action phase. They are just very much
Yeah.
orbit. So I think, you know, they would, in a lot of cases, so we're about to send out a report, which I will make sure you have, so you can share it with all your listeners and viewers.
Lovely. I like reports.
Yeah, lots of stats. So it's an annual report of the last year, but it does show that, you know, the majority of people are still contacting us by email. I think it's because actually talking about what's happened can be quite traumatizing in itself. Although some people do still prefer that sort of cathartic talking through it at their own pace. So they would contact us, and I think in the first place we kind of reassure them about, you're not the first person it's happened to. We can support you. You are not on your own. We're not judging you. You know, you are a victim of a crime, and that's where we start. Because for a lot of people, they immediately internalize it and say, I've done something wrong, I've been shamed, I'm shameful, I've acted in a behavior that's shameful. Before they've even considered the fact that maybe they were coerced into it, or, you know, weren't actually consenting in the process to begin with. We then talk through what their legal rights are. So we do have access to some free legal advice with our partners at the Legal Advice Centre, which is part of Queen Mary's University. They are trainee solicitors, and as part of their training, they have to deliver pro bono. They are an amazing group of people, and they're so passionate about this subject.
Yeah.
So they donate their time, and they will talk through what people's rights are in terms of injunctions and takedowns and things like that. And then they can assist in acquiring barristers should it get to that stage. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We talk through what should happen with the police. I'm going to speak very carefully now. Police response is very poor for this topic. A huge amount of victim blaming. Our clients are still regularly told, well, it's your fault, you shouldn't have shared the image. What do you think we're going to do about it? Why would we waste our resources on something like this? Oh, you don't want us, you want the internet police. You know, all those sorts of things we hear all the time from clients.
Yeah. But
we will encourage them to go and complain. We will encourage them to go back and make another report. And where possible, we will support them with that. So things like making sure that they've taken screenshots, they have evidence, you know, some advice around how not to impede an investigation. So not retaliating, not getting into a flame war with the person who's making threats, that kind of thing. And just general advice, which is helpful to share now, I guess, around, you know, just write down some notes before you go to the police. When you turn up at a police station, hysterical, they're going to hear every third word you say. And the minute that they hear anything about photos on the internet, they're probably not going to stop. They're not going to listen. So we talk through with them, you know, these are the salient points you need to take with you, that have a chronology, to pick out the important bits and take a breath, calm down before you go. And I think that's really empowering for people. They get a much better response when they're really clear. We do generally say, tell them that you're talking to us, and we're really happy to talk to them if they would like that.
There's nothing like a bit of advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, so a lot of our clients don't want to go to the police. And this is something that, you know, police find quite difficult, and the media definitely don't find difficult to understand. Sometimes the actual content was posted such a long time ago, but they've only just found out. They don't want to stir up trouble. They don't want to piss the person off again. You know, they're worried of retribution. Maybe they've moved on and the other person's moved on, you know, and they're like, well, okay, you were angry then, but there's no point in causing a hassle now for you. There is no right to anonymity for victims. because it is not under the Sexual Offences Act, they don't have an automatic right. So they're very fearful. And while a lot of work's been done around media outlets not reporting names of victims, there's nothing stopping it happening. And we have had some very high profile cases. In fact, we had one case where a woman had an affair. They worked for a very big organisation. The partner found out and basically posted some content of the two of them. He went to court, but because they worked for this big organisation, it was fair game to name both of them and doorstep them and post pictures of her on the front of a national newspaper. Now, where she lived was a very small place and everybody knew who she was. You know, really, really awful, but it didn't breach any publication sort of standards. It didn't breach IPCC or anything like that. So that was a really, really difficult case to deal with. Thankfully, Right to Be Forgotten has now helped with some of that, because we, you know, it now we can say, well, that's not in the public interest. That's a very private matter that's been dealt with, and it was a criminal matter. This person is a victim of a crime, therefore we've got a better chance now of getting it taken down. So there's lots of reasons why they might not want the police, but we'll talk through it and we will encourage where possible. Most of our clients, what they really want is the content to be taken down. And that's,
absolutely,
I think that's our kind of specialist area. Now, it's interesting because we've talked a little bit about underage images and images of minors, and the fact that the images themselves are illegal. So therefore, organisations like our partners at the Internet Watch Foundation have a legal right and a legal duty to contact providers and say, you have to take that down, you're breaking the law if you don't. The minute you turn 18, the pictures aren't illegal. So they can just ignore us if they want to, and we're not a statutory body. So this is a bit of a battle, and so we do have mixed results. There are some platforms who hate us. I'm personally quite proud that there's a very, very nasty site that hosts quite a lot of illegal content as well, which I'm now banned from for a year. So that's quite good. I must have really annoyed them.
That's like being blocked for standing up for your rights. Yes,
absolutely. But you know, we've kind of learnt the language to use. We try not to come across as too confrontational with those platforms. You know, it is about saying, we're here speaking on behalf of a victim. This image has been reported has been posted without the permission. It has been reported to the police where that's necessary, or sometimes, of course, they were perhaps a minor when the image was taken. They might be an adult now, in which case we have a bit more clout. But in most cases, it is a very nice, look, we're acting on their behalf. They've asked us to take it down. Could you take it down, please? Thanks very much. Quite often, some of those sites who are a bit more problematic, they might not engage with us in a dialogue, but they might still take it down. We have roughly around 70 to 75% success in our reports, which compared to my other helpline, which deals with non-image based abuse, we have about 98% takedown, but that's much more straightforward because it's in line with social media policies. We're now dealing with, you know, really obscure porn sites in Southeast Asia, or Russia, or places like that. So to have that level of takedown is really good. An interesting thing for us, I think, has been around working with porn sites. So some of the biggest porn sites, they host huge amounts of this content. Now, it's difficult because they would say, we don't want people to be abused. You know, it's not our remit to have that content posted without consent. So when it's reported, they take it down very quickly. In fact, Pornhub do put up a banner when they take content down that says this video was removed at the request of the Revenge Porn Helpline, which I think is a really good statement and reminder to perpetrators. But that said, we're having constant dialogue with them because they still have categories that people can choose that have things like voyeurism, ex-girlfriend, revenge shots, getting back at my ex, all those sorts of things. They're just feeding a desire for this kind of content and kind of normalizing it. So that conversation continues, but at least we can reassure clients, you know, because I think for a lot of people, the thought that they're on that kind of site and that they're having 30,000 people viewing their content and getting off on their content is just absolutely horrific. You know, it's so hard to get your head around that. So for us to say, look, don't panic, they will take it down really quickly, that just offers that little bit of reassurance and safety for them.
Yeah, because I'm aware that they're obviously like you, the stuff that you have to look at in work and work. It's, believe you me, I am cats and flowers on a weekend. That's kind of what I try and feel. It's almost like the antithesis of everything that I have to deal with during the week.
Yeah.
But there is something about, so what did happen when you were talking and you said, actually, so the images come in and blah, 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 blah. I just thought, actually, this is why I have the issue about the phenomena of cyberbullying. So what you talked about was somebody that was being stalked, somebody that was being, all of the different categories that we have that may not be classed as cyberbullying. Actually, this is a form of cyber-based bullying.
Yeah.
And again, I was just listening as you were talking, and I was like, well, there's sextortion, there's coercive relationship because the person had thought that it was his wife, then there was sexual abuse, then there was, actually, these categories just get broader and broader and broader.
Yes.
And right at the very centre of this is a human being who did not consent. Yep. And it's all about what, and I think we were into that word consent. And I'm going to say, actually, this is why I'm such an advocate of teaching consent with toddlers, young children at school, you know, and all the way through, because I think that's the bit that we might be misconstruing at the moment about when people say, well, actually.
That's true. That's a massive part of our drive. That's exactly what we're talking about. It's not talking about revenge porn with kids. It's about talking about respecting one another and what consent genuinely means, more than just, oh, well, I asked if we could have sex once, you know. That's a really difficult thing. It is that really base level of respect. So that's really important. We do work obviously very closely with lots of other support organisations. So we do signpost on. So, you know, you mentioned stalking and harassment. That's a huge amount. It's so interlinked with phenomena. And so we have a great relationship with the Stalking Helpline. We've worked with that for years, actually. And quite often the clients will come to us and they have no idea. They can't recognise what's happening to them as stalking. So all my team actually have had training and have ongoing CPD around recognising and talking about it, and, you know, that kind of first stage of supporting the client. And of course, then when the penny drops, they kind of see it as part of the bigger picture. But we do make sure that they're getting all the right advice from the right organisations. Again, we work with victim support, we work with all the domestic abuse charities, all of those sorts of things to make sure that people get everything. We also engage with more specialist organisations, so things like honour-based violence organisations, specific support networks for Muslim girls and women, male violence and LGBT issues as well, because obviously, you know, sometimes people need to talk to people who know a bit more specifically what their particular issue is. One of the things we didn't talk about, and I think is really worth mentioning, people don't often understand what it is. They know on the top level, okay, so somebody phones the helpline, you help them take content down. But what I hear and what I work through with my team is for their trauma. My team are amazing. You know, I'm so proud of them. They are resilient, they are strong, they're funny, they're feisty, they will fight for the clients, and the clients come away feeling empowered. Actually, the trauma that the clients have to go through, spending 8 hours a day looking at porn, and that really graphic and really, really, really hardcore porn sites. So the content that we're looking for, and that's the bit that I think people don't realise, is the client might have found 5 photos. But when we start looking, we will find hundreds of copies of that where it's been shared everywhere. And my team, we don't have a magic wand. We don't have a technical solution that does that. My team manually have to go and look for content. You know, they're much like the analysts on the Internet Watch Foundation in that context. It's exhausting. And it's not so much, as I say, the content that they're looking for might be fairly innocent comparatively, but the other content on these sites can be really, really difficult. And of course, we regularly do stumble across child abuse material that we have to then report, you know, violent content, just really, really unpleasant. And I think, you know, I don't get to shout enough about it, but to say, you know, my team don't run a call centre. We're not customer service advisors. They do a really good job. And I just kind of want to shout out that, really. And I think, you know, I think our clients on the whole do really understand and appreciate it. And sometimes we have a bit of attachment issues where we have to work through that as well, you know. But, you know, I think the whole topic around this is very, very difficult. You know, about a quarter of our clients are men, and that's not talked about either. But the misogyny, the vitriol that's aimed towards women on these platforms is really hard to understate, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking my language now, because this is the cyber trauma. This is how cyber trauma actually came to my. I don't even know. Oh, I can remember how it happened actually. So that the story of how I came up with cyber trauma was to do with, I was doing a presentation on peer-to-peer grooming in about 2011, 2012. And I happened to come across a page where there were images that I was traumatized by. And recently I've just had this happen on 13 Reasons Why. So there was a sexual assault scene, and I sat and I was going, what the WAT, and I kind of just sat there and was like, okay, this is what I'm talking about. So when victims find out they have images online, they will go looking. This is what, when I've been talking to victims, this is what they also do. And then they happen upon this, as you've talked about, the misogynistic nature of quite a lot of the pornography sites. And then they become cognitively dissonant to, well, maybe I have done it out of need, and maybe, and that's where they can get confused and further shamed. And it's pretty much the same for yourselves as practitioners. You get what we label in the therapy world as vicarious trauma. So you're traumatized by listening and seeing the trauma. And actually, this is one of the things to say to people. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a quick podcast with my friend Gary, and we talked about the darknet. And we said, if you're going to go and have a look, be prepared, because what's seen cannot be unseen. And it stays with you for a long time. It's really, really visceral. It has such an impact. And for these victims, this is the most intimate of things that we do. You know, we're not pornography stars that have said consensually, this is what I want to do. And I'm not always sure that pornography is consensual anyway. But there's something around, this has been done, and it was that moment where you thought everything was private. So this is about and I'm not talking about privacy on the internet. I'm talking about that private moment that you have with somebody where you agree to do something. And, you know, I'm just thinking about years and years and years ago, it might well have been a Polaroid, you know, that happened, you know, well, let's do a bit of a sexy pic. And, but now we're talking about things that can happen. And I was quite interested when you talked about the idea of secret recording. So this doesn't always have to be all about sex, does it? This can happen in toilets. So I've seen a lot that appears on secret filming of, you know, women going to the toilet. So this topic, I don't think we've even got enough time even if we did a 50-minute, an hour, there's just not enough time to cover what it is you have to deal with as a helpline. And also, I just wanted to say that your helpline is not 500 people strong. It's a really small unit, isn't it? It's a lot of people having to do a lot of work in terms of what you're doing, but the actual helpline itself, there isn't that many of you that do it.
There's three of us who work on it, and I work on two different helplines, and one of them's part-time. We really are a very, very small helpline. Funding's always an issue, so without getting on my soapbox, you know, charitable sector funding is really badly managed. Last year, in fact, we were given 6 months funding at a time. So how you're expected to support your team, who are, as you say, dealing with the traumatic content, but are really committed when they're constantly on a 1 month notice. I mean, it's amazing that I have got the team I've got, and, you know, bless them. And long may they stay, you know. So now we're kind of really pushing for, if you want sustainable services and that can grow and that can support people, then you need to fund them appropriately. We run on such a shoestring, and we're not asking for more, but we're asking for a bit more of a certain future, you know, 3 years funding, something where we can really start building. But this kind of piecemeal funding, it's just really difficult to work with and to keep motivating and to be able to reassure clients, we're still going to be working with you in a couple of months, you know.
Yeah, and this is an issue. I mean, let me just say something that came up yesterday. Cyber is not going away. One of the things that was quite promising yesterday, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be telling people, but there are now going to be specific cyber divisions who are dedicated to, so not action fraud, not on the beat bobbies, but actual cyber-based police officers and sections, and that I'm quite hopeful for, because I mean, they're going to be overrun within a month, but there's also something about the police are now trying to deal with this and saying, okay, we need cyber dedicated officers. And I'm just going to say, who probably need training in all of the areas of stalking, cyberbullying. you know, and there's only so many of us that can do this. So I do the cyber trauma, you do the kind of revenge porn, somebody else at Internet Watch Foundation do what they do. There's a lot of us that could come together and
there is. You mentioned police training. Another link you could share with your viewers. We did some research, just a very brief piece of research with our friends at Suffolk University. I'm a senior fellow in online safeguarding. And basically we kind of went, I wonder what training police get in dealing with image-based abuse like this. And so we interviewed about 286 police officers. Rather unsurprisingly, I think only 2 or 3% of them had ever had any training in how to deal with this issue. So 90 plus something had never had any training in what this was or how to deal with it. And then we asked them how confident they felt in investigating it. Well, they didn't. And then we talked about, would they know how to gather evidence to take this forward if it was going to be a prosecution? And they didn't. And we were really grateful that the police were so honest. You know, they kind of went, you know, we feel really bad because we know that this is a growing issue. We want to be able to support victims, but we haven't got a clue where to start. So I'll share that with you. A conversation to be had with College of Policing around how important this is.
I was just going to say, actually, let's attack the college.
And you know, it is about, you know, getting the right people, because I think, as I say, you know, it's the frontline stuff. It's not about this going to some chief inspector who goes, oh yes, that's going to be a policy area for us. It's about those frontline people who have the crying victim to just go, you don't deserve this, you're a victim, let's help you. That's what we need to change. I know we're running out of time already. Sextortion, just briefly mentioned, because there's been quite a lot in the news quite recently around it. So we're part of a working group with the National Crime Agency. So yay for the police on this bit of work. I'm not always down on them. They do a good job. Under-resourced, all of that stuff. But sextortion, when it's organised crime gangs, this is quite a big issue. And we have seen a huge rise in numbers in the last few weeks. So it's something out of interest for us. It's really, really peaked. It's more than doubled in the last few weeks. We don't know why. But these are cases where it's either a completely unsolicited email, which is the latest thing we're seeing. We've had quite a lot of people coming to us saying, I've had an email, somebody's told me that they filmed me on a porn site, pleasuring myself, and now they're demanding money. And I had one gentleman who was very confused because he said he hadn't even been on a porn site. So I had to explain it was a completely spam email, and just report it and delete it. But people are actually falling foul of that as an extortion scam. Obviously, the ones we predominantly deal with are they've been groomed themselves by somebody, quite often on, it used to be on media, but actually now it's moving towards dating sites. Where they're being contacted by these people. Very quickly, they're being talked into going onto Skype or another webcam. They perform consensually in a sex act with this other person, and then the other person very quickly says, actually, I'm not that pretty young lady you've been talking to, I'm a man, and if you don't give me 10 grand, 30 grand, in one case £500,000, because it was a famous person, then we're going to expose you to all of your contacts who we have because you friended us on Facebook. You know, we deal with a lot of those cases. A lot of them are based in the Ivory Coast, Tunisia, Morocco, places like that. Philippines is a huge area. Sadly, we've had a lot of high profile cases resulting in suicide in the UK. This is a really, really serious issue. So, you know, again, when we're talking about advice and things like that, don't pay, call the police, call us, don't panic.
Oh, do you know, one of the people I actually want to interview is Julia von Weiler, around, because obviously I know she does sextortion, but I also know one of the other people in Germany that, because Germany are, for me, Germany is the place to be for e-safety and kind of what's happening there. But yeah, I mean, I've seen that in a film, a documentary. I think I might have. Actually, there is something about people's cameras being hacked and so on, but also sometimes it's bullshit. And this is the thing that human beings buy into, don't they, is it could. So there's something around the fear-driven crime organisation. And it was a conversation yesterday, but I'm not going to talk about it on the podcast. In terms of, you know, the new trends that are popping up are really, really interesting. But obviously,
we can do
that's going to fill another 400. Yes, actually, I'd love to do a part 2 on this one, Laura, in terms of, you know, what people might come back to me with, emails, messages, conversations. Sometimes this will sit there for a few months before people come back, and hopefully this will add on to something that was aired last week, because I'm going to say last week because it will have been last week by now. And then obviously we'll see where this goes from there. And obviously, yeah, the College of Policing, I actually said yesterday, they need the cyber training from cyber professionals, not so much cyber e-safety or cyber security, but actually the victims who feed into our knowledge that feed to kind of the level of policing. But you know, I hold out hope. Maybe I'll hashtag, and maybe we'll see them on Twitter. See what we can get. Yeah. Right. Okay then. Yes, we are. I mean, yeah, we've done what, 45 minutes. So there goes the half an hour again. So, is there anything you would like anybody to know? I'm going to put your details in. So if you're happy, your Twitter handle, the helpline details, the report that you're going to send over. Anything else that you would like to say, or you'd like people to know?
This podcast predominantly for professionals. You know what? Don't assume you know what it is, because we don't, and we see different cases every day, different circumstances. It's not the same for everybody. So in the same way as if we were working with young people around these sorts of topics, listen, don't judge, let the people tell you their story and work with them at their pace around what's happening. And if you have any questions, do get in touch with us. That's what we're here for. You know, we're really happy. We all want to be upskilled, and my team need to be upskilled. We do lots of reciprocal training with other organisations to make sure that we're all on message, you know. So if you want to talk about it, if you have any questions, if you're not sure, just give us a shout and we'll do what we can to help.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for your time, Laura. And you know, as Laura says, anybody get in touch. If I don't know the answer, I tend to signpost people on, and obviously this is something that I deal with in terms of therapy and the victims. I can't see everybody, which is why I tend to signpost and say there are these people. And again, I am just going to make a slight note that there's not many counsellors and psychotherapists trained or who understand in this, and that's my kind of life goal at the minute, is to teach them as well, because this is going to come into so many therapy rooms, and not just psychosexual therapists either. So
I agree.
Yeah, I will leave that slight little rant at the end there, and I'll just thank you so much for your time, Laura.
No, thank you, and thank you for raising all these topics. It's really important.
All right, thank you.